Well, good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of Notre Dame's Alumni Association, welcome to the On the Sidelines presentation today. My name is Sharon Kane. I'm Director of the Professional and Academic Programs here at the Alumni Association. And this On the Sidelines series that we offer before, as part of the Football Fridays experience of Every Home Friday, is an example of the academic programming that we do here at the Alumni Association that's really designed to provide that intellectual stimulation and engagement. And it's also an opportunity for our alumni and friends to have a sense of the work, the important work that our faculty are doing and the value that they bring to the world. So thanks for joining us in the series. Today we have the hackers, crackers, and corporate attackers and how we make sense of the data breaches in our digital world today. So I'm delighted to share this topic with you. We've all read about or heard about the millions and millions of people who are impacted through these data breaches, whether it's something with our government, the IRS, or Office of Personnel Management, or Sony, or Target, or Blue Cross Blue Shield, and on the list goes. So kind of a scary thing, but it's important for us to have an understanding of what's going on and how do we better protect ourselves. And so we have in today's speaker an expert. So I'm delighted to share with you Dr. Corey Angst. Corey is an associate professor in the management department in our Mendoza College of Business, the #1 college, as ranked. And I want to tell you a little bit about Corey before he begins his presentation. As I mentioned, he's an associate professor and in Mendoza, and he is able to share some of his research interests about the value of IT technology usage and the transformational effect of information technology, particularly coming in the healthcare industry. And he's had his research published in many top journals in a diverse array of topics. He received his PhD from the Smith School at the University of Maryland, and prior to pursuing his graduate education, he worked for 10 years in both technical and strategic roles, as well as consulted for multinational corporations. So he brings his corporate experience, his education, and his research expertise to bear on this important topic. So please join me in welcome Dr. Corey Angst.
Thank you. And thank you, Sharon, for that lovely introduction. It's great to be here. I'm not a domer. I feel like I have to apologize for that. But I must say, this is my 9th year starting at Notre Dame, and I know that I love this place like an alumni does. And I have 3 kids, and one day I hope that at least one of them comes through and experiences the undergraduate experience of Notre Dame. So I've seen thousands and thousands of students at this point, and I can tell you unequivocally that it is a special place. So it's actually an honor here to be able to talk to you guys about this topic of mine. So here's what we're going to try and cover today. If this gets off track, that's okay. You guys can lead me however you'd like to go with this. But I'm going to talk about data breaches, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background, some definitions. That's going to go quickly. It's pretty painless. A little bit of history on this and where all this came from and why they seem to be happening so frequently these days. Just a show of hands, how many have received that letter in the mail saying your data has been breached? So I've been breached at least twice that I know of in the last year. So I think we're coming from a common space here. Even though I study this topic, I'm probably no better at making myself safe than what you guys are. So I wish I had a silver bullet. If you're here for the silver bullet, you're better off watching the clips of the Notre Dame football game out here. It's probably going to be more exciting than what I have to do here. We don't have a silver bullet for this. But I can give you some things to think about, and I can give you some strategies to at least deter the most naive of attacks towards you. And that's what this second to the last bullet will be about. How do we protect ourselves? Because that seems to be the question I get the most. And then lastly, if I haven't put you to sleep at this point, I'll talk a little bit about my research, and that's guaranteed to put you to sleep. So after lunch, you've got a nice little break here. But first, I want to show you something really cool. I think this is fascinating. So this is a map, and this is a still image. I'm going to pan over to the internet for a second. These are real-time attacks. We are looking at this in real time. You will notice these are time-stamped 204:46. Now I happen to have 204:43 at this moment. These are attacks that are happening worldwide. We can see the attack origin, we can see the attack type, we can see the target, we can see information about the target, we can see information about a whole host of things that are happening here. And in fact, there's all sorts of interesting dynamic things built into this. If I just mouse over one of these, you'll see, I think this is Kansas City. Can't quite tell for sure, but Kansas City right now is being attacked by a lot of different locations. Is that scary to you? Yes. And Seattle's being, some obvious places, right? And some obvious places that seem to be attacking us. We've got a lot going over here in China. We've got some things happening in Russia. We all know about the attacks that are coming out of Africa. We see a lot of that these days, some very unsophisticated, some quite sophisticated. You guys can access this site, at least this level of this site. You don't need a password or anything. If you want to get into more details of this, you do need to set up an account. And of course, when you set up an account, that leaves you open for a breach. So you're going to see, I'll keep coming back to this topic as we go here. That didn't scare you enough, this might. So I saw this picture this week, actually, as I was putting this deck together, and I said, that can't be real, this has to be a fake. It turns out it is a real picture. This was taken in 2005 off the coast of South Africa, and this guy used to be a marine biologist that was in the kayak there in front. I jokingly say that. Turns out what they were doing is they were studying shark behavior, and they towed empty kayaks around for weeks, and the sharks became very familiar with the kayak being out there, so then they started putting people in there to get very, very close to the sharks. This happens to be a 5-meter. For all those Americans in the crowd like me, that's a 15-foot shark. That's bigger than that kayak, and that's scary. Just like this breach stuff is scary. More than half, and just by a show of hands, it looked like more than half of us had had our data stolen. And most of this has happened in the past couple of years. Here's some very recent statistics I just scraped off this week. And by the way, if you're really interested in this stuff, you can go to this place called privacyrights.org, another website that you can access information on what's been breached. And Sharon, I'm happy to share my slide deck too with folks if you'd like to send that out. So we're sitting here just under 1 billion records breached at this point. Now we have just over 300 million people in this country, and most of these are US based. So you start to ask yourself, this is looking a lot like most of us our records have been breached more than once. Keep in mind, there's also another problem here, and that's that it's only our records, those 18 and older, that are typically breached. Because other than medical care, the primary reason why people are getting breached is for things like, they have financial records somewhere, and a lot of kids that are young don't have those records established yet. So, all this to say, this is happening a lot, and it's increasing in frequency. And it's not just this guy anymore that's doing it. In fact, it's not that guy doing it anymore. It's an organized crime element that's piecing together a market, an underground market for this. You may have heard talk of the Silk Road or the dark web. These are internets that exist that are not the same internet that you and I use on a daily basis. This is where illicit things are exchanged. Things like credit card information, sale of drugs, sale of prostitution. All of that exists out there. And they are doing things like stealing massive amounts of financial information. So credit cards, ACHs, automatic clearinghouse, so bank information, wire fraud, and they're targeting you. We have no doubt about this at this point. They target where we shop. Each one of these has been hacked in the last 2 years. So Target, eBay, Home Depot, PF Chang, Harbor Touch. A lot of you probably haven't heard of Harbor Touch because none of you have eaten at a Harbor Touch. Harbor Touch has the point of sale systems in 150,000 restaurants and bars in the United States. Almost every electronic transaction that happens in a bar or a restaurant goes through a Harbor Touch system. So these guys are big players. They've been hacked. Where you bank, JP Morgan, Citibank, Heartland, where you get care, your healthcare facilities, they've all been hacked. That was the one hack I got this summer, that my data was breached from my healthcare provider here in town. And I think the thing that scares us the most, where you do these other things. Ashley Madison was hacked this year. I mean, is nothing sacred anymore? Can we even not have affairs and get our information stolen? This is actually a very serious point because, as you know, and here's the irony of all this, all of a sudden the politicians are stepping up and saying, we got to do something about this hacking thing because they're finding out that their information is in the Ashley Madison site. Yeah. But is this petty? Is it just small stuff in the grand scheme of things? What do you guys think? What do you think the global cost of cybercrime is relative to the global market, let me say, the global market of illicit drugs? Which one's going to be bigger here? Probably because I made up this slide here, right? $388 billion is what it's costing. It's what it's costing firms, individuals, banks, $388 billion, and the market for illicit drugs is currently standing at $288 billion. That's shocking to me. It's really shocking. And there's a legitimate, if you can use that word, underground economy for this stuff. So what do you buy and sell? And how much is it worth? Well, it turns out there's actually a clearinghouse, a market for this. The number one sale is bank account credentials. And they range in price from $10 to $1,000, depending upon the perceived amount that will be in the bank account. And there's ways of figuring out how much we think somebody will have in a bank account. Things that are pretty easy to figure out. Socioeconomic status. Somebody's information was stolen from a Beverly Hills account, then they're likely to generate more revenue from that kind of account. But you can buy credit cards as long as you have the CVV or CVV2 code, that little 3-digit or 4-digit code on the back of your card. They're buying these. And remind me to tell you about my experience with this as we go. Credit cards themselves. Surprisingly, the number here is quite low because physical cards themselves are not worth as much money anymore. Why? What's that? You shut them down. You should shut them down instantly. And credit card companies often recognize fraud. They're getting pretty good at this. And they can contact you and shut them down. Yeah. I knew you were going to ask this question. Is anybody in here from LifeLock? So I'll get to the protect yourself later. The one thing I'll say right up front, I don't have any financial interest in LifeLock, nor do I have anything against them. I personally don't understand how the model can work. And that's for me. So I'll say the early life of LifeLock was the narrative around it was we can protect you. That's very much changed to we can get back what was yours. And the lesson there came, I don't know if you guys followed this at all, but the CEO of LifeLock put his social security number on billboards all around Chicago and said, I'm so confident in my company, here's my social security number. Well, the hackers just went ballistic on this guy and they took him down with absolutely no trouble at all. So that was, I'm sure, a lesson to the folks that saw that happening. So what they shifted to is, like, instead of saying we can protect you, because I don't think there's anybody out there that can say that with a straight face, it's we can do things to make this, to get you back in the game, to make sure that the fraud doesn't continue on your accounts. Hopefully get money back if money was stolen from you. But we'll save some of that for the end of this presentation on how you do that. But anyway, to end that, there is a market for this. Okay, so let's take a step back, because I said I wanted to find some terms for you. Hacking. This is the term that scares us the most. Well, actually, this is an innocuous term. This term goes back a very long time. And hacking is not, in and of itself, a bad thing. There's hackers that do things legitimately. They are really good computer coders and knowledge of computer, have great expertise. However, the popular press has turned that into a bad term, and they refer to everything as a hack. And their term for hacking is always malicious. It's rarely that good things can happen from certain hackers. So we'll get to breaking that down a little bit further, but I want to talk to you about cracking. Cracking is always malicious. Cracking is, the intent is to do harm. Crackers will go out there and try to do something to systems so that they can infiltrate them. And we'll talk a little bit about how they do that. Spoofing, faking the originating IP address in a datagram. By the way, it doesn't get more technical than this, guys, so don't freak out if you think this is going to get too technical. And you'll see why here in a second, that it's not going to get. Freaking, cracking telecom networks, not to be confused with twerking, which is a dance in a provocative manner. You know how hard it is to find a picture that's okay for the Alumni Association of twerking? I looked for hours trying to find a twerking picture, and now Notre Dame is going to throw me out for doing that. But anyway, the ones that we're going to focus on today are hacking and cracking, but I'm actually going to take on the term that the popular press does and use hacking from the negative connotation. All right, but even then we have, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but we have professional hackers, black hatters, white hatters. The ones we hear the most about are the black hatters, the guys that are doing something wrong. We have script kiddies. Have anybody in here heard that term? You will now. A script kiddie. Somebody that mostly kids or students, kids that are doing things sometimes malicious, sometimes because simply they can do it and they want to see how far they can go. But oftentimes they're using the tools that were created by black hats. And you say, well, how can they do that? This stuff is available. They have programs written out there to do this. They have instruction manuals. They basically have YouTube videos in the dark web that show you how to do certain things, how to take down systems, how to do things like, in particular, ideological hacking, which is defacing websites. Coming in and, we're playing Georgia Tech this weekend, taking down Georgia Tech's website by putting, ND Go Irish on it. Now that seems very sort of, not really that malicious, but it is. It's attacking a website. These guys are the scary ones too, the underemployed adult hackers. We see a lot of this coming out of Eastern Europe for some reason, is even looking at that little live website, you could see that happening. Criminal hackers, a lot of overlap with the black hats. Corporate spies, which are, this used to be the entire gamut of how you break into firms, and now it's moved much more towards digital. And lastly, these are the scariest group, the disgruntled employees. Why? Because these guys don't have to have technical knowledge, and often they don't. And any of you guys that are working in companies out there, even wander through your own home, test out how easy it is to find somebody's password. And that's really what's going on with disgruntled employees. They're figuring out other people's passwords. They already know usernames. I mean, that's not difficult to find. Here at Notre Dame, you take your first initial, last name. That's our username. I hope I didn't reveal anything too shocking there. But that's how most firms do this. Collecting papers, collecting trash that should be shredded. That's what we get into when we see disgruntled employees. So how are they doing this, and how can we stop them from doing it? I'm going to give you guys a quiz now. You didn't think this was just a free lunch, did you? I'm going to test you. Well, let me tell you the punchline first. This is a real quote. The only way to 100% protect yourself from attacks is to turn off your computer. I like that quote, but I like a conference I went to, and I want to get this right because I can't quote it verbatim yet. But the speaker said, I I have something that's very enlightening for all of you in the audience. I'm going to tell you how to ensure that you never get hacked. And he said, it's very simple. You never open a bank account. You don't go to the doctor. That one's surprising. You never use a credit card or, God forbid, a debit card. You never reveal your social security number. You never get a driver's license, and you don't pay taxes. Guess how many people hopped up and said, all right, I'll sign up? Nobody. I mean, we want conveniences in this life. If you have any of those things, you have a personal record. You have a digital record, more than likely. Well, almost certainly at this point. Anytime you have a digital record and it's stored somewhere other than on your personal PC that is not connected to a website ever, then you're vulnerable. And there's really no way around that. So I'm actually convinced at this point in society, in America, now there are, I'm sure, villages in South America or wherever where you can completely go off the grid. Maybe there are in the United States too. But for the way that we function, the way that all of us in this room function, I don't think that there's a way to 100% protect yourself. It's just not possible. So this quote here, the only way to 100% protect yourself is to turn off your computers. This happened to come from a guy that happens to know a little bit about this. You guys probably won't know this fella, but Dan Chanik. He's the chairman of the Information Security and Policy Advisory Board for NIST, which is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. This guy knows what he's talking about. His job is to look at issues of security at a national level. And he says this simply is not possible. His next quote is this: if you have something valuable that hackers want, they're going to try and steal it. And more than likely, they will steal it. They can steal it. So why are they happening so much? Anybody in here from JP Morgan? I know we have lots of folks from JP Morgan. I'm going to give you a case example. This is not blasphemous in any way at all. But JP Morgan spends $250 million a year on security, and they have 1,000 employees that are solely devoted to the security of their firm, the digital security of their firm. Okay? They should be locked down, right? Never going to happen. Well, last year it happened. Hackers stole contact information, names, address, phone numbers, email addresses, 76 million households, 7 million small businesses. It happened. How did it happen? How does this happen that we could have a company that spends $250 million and 1,000 employees and yet they get hacked? It's really quite simple. So in June, an employee's PC was infected. So how was it infected? I'll get to that in a second here with the quiz. But there's ways of infiltrating. Mostly it's through email at this point. So you get an email from an untrusted source, you click on something in that email, all of a sudden your computer's infected. That's what happened here. So this employee's computer was infected, and from that they were able to track keystrokes and figure out how they're logging into the system. So then when the person is remote, some of you may not recognize the term VPN, but this is a virtual private network, and we use them all the time. I'm sure Sharon's nodding her head. I use mine whenever I'm away from Notre Dame. So whenever I'm away from this campus, I just sign in through this virtual private network, and it makes my computer feel like it's sitting here on campus. Well, that's what this person did. Well, when they logged in through the VPN, then this hacker had access to the entire network that this employee did. And why does that matter? Because, well, that gave him the low-level layer, but he needed to get further up into the chain to really get access to all of the information they wanted. So he developed this malicious program to do this. Well, finally they get all the way up to administrator privileges and then started stealing data. And he stole the data slowly so that he wouldn't be detected. This is the MO of a very intelligent, a very sophisticated hacker. And ultimately ends up with 76 million households. And we happen to be one of those households. So we got one of these letters too. So here's the irony of this though. There was one thing that was wrong. And of all the servers, all of the computer systems that they had in the bank, one of them didn't get an update that it was supposed to get. And because it didn't get that two-factor, and you might have heard this term, this update, a lot of you guys are seeing this email now. If you have Gmail, you're getting an email that says, okay, you've given us your password, but now what we'd like you to do is to two-factor authenticate this, meaning give us your cell phone number, and then we're going to send you a text that has a code in it. Enter that code in, and now it's more secure. I know this freaks a lot of you out. Like, why am I going to give them my cell phone number? I already gave them my email address. And my password. Do I really feel comfortable? This is actually much, much more secure than just putting in a password. It's two factors. So one is something you know, and that's your password. Two is something you have. Now, it used to be in the old days when I was with DuPont, we had these things. We called them tokens. These were little chips that had a code that changed every 8 seconds. And then when we were logging in, we looked at that code and typed it in. Something I have that identifies who I am. The only way that somebody accesses my account is if they have that chip. If they don't have that chip, even if they have my password, they don't get in. Well, we have one better than that now. We have cell phones. Anybody in here not have a cell phone? I'm not going to embarrass you, but everybody has a cell phone. My mom got a smartphone last week. It was amazing. So thankful for that. She switched over. But we have now our own tokens because they have a unique cell phone number for everyone. So now they can push a token to us that allows us to verify who we are. This is a much, much better way. Okay, so now that we have this, the problem was that one of their servers did not get the update. So all it did was allow the password to come in, and there was no two-factor authentication, and the hacker figured that out. Okay, so the point is, this is not small time anymore. This is not, guys in garages trying to figure out how to do this. This is very sophisticated attacks. So the password thing, this is fascinating. This blew me away. It's hard to get a password, right? Ooh, there's a big echo right there. So this is a study that was conducted in the United Kingdom in a London train depot in 2014. They trained interviewers, young people, mostly grad students, to go into the train station and just randomly talk to commuters on the train and try to get their password. Nobody's going to give your password on a train, right? 70% would reveal their password for, it's a good candy bar. It's Cadbury. 70% would reveal their password for a candy bar. I don't even know how that happens. It boggles my mind that this happens. But here, it goes one level deeper. 34% volunteered it without even taking the bribe. This is how insecure how poorly we secure our identities. People are willing to give this stuff up. Now, maybe what's going through their head, I'm trying to rationalize this. Why would people do this? Well, maybe they're thinking, okay, yeah, I really do want that candy bar, so I'm just going to give you my password, and then I'm going to go quickly change the password after I do that. But I don't know that that's the case. I think that a lot of people say, I don't have anything valuable anyway, so yeah, I'll give you the password to my computer there. Well, guess what? The password for that computer there is probably the password for my bank account, might be the password for other things that I access on the internet. So one thing leads to another, and we figure this thing out. 79% unwittingly gave away stuff. Things like, small talk, where are you from? Was your mother was she a Smith? Was she a Vrabel? Was she a... So, one of the common questions they ask in these password things, mother's maiden name. You can really, really quickly figure these things out. All right. And, of course, family names, pets, football teams are all the most commonly used things for passwords. So don't raise your hand. How many in here have a Go Irish 215, ND Go Irish, ND Go X? I used to have one of those. I don't anymore. Yeah. We'll catch up afterwards then. What's your username? Mother's maiden name? All right. And you're probably wondering, this is a pain, right? They want you to make now a strong password. You start typing things in and they say, oh, that's weak. That's weak. You can be more creative than that. And you're like banging your head like, seriously, I can't come up with anything more creative than that. Here's why. If you have a single digit, I hope nobody has a single digit password. A lot of systems don't even allow this anymore. But if you did, there's only 36 possible combinations. And I know you're doing the math. How can there be 36? Well, 0 through 9 and then A through Z. So we're actually counting the letters here. It gets more complicated if you use lowercase and uppercase. But it only takes a human 3 minutes to figure out a password with that. But here's where it gets interesting. When you get down to 5, and there's a lot of financial websites now that require an 8-digit password, here's why they require that. There's 60 million combinations for a 5-digit. It would take a human 10 years. You couldn't do it, period. You can't figure out a password manually. But it takes a computer 30 seconds to figure that out. A 5-digit password, 30 seconds. That's not on a supercomputer. Some of these guys have weaved together entire networks of computers that can process these things way, way faster than that. So even a 10-digit, and there's not very many people that are using 10-digit passwords, would take 59 years. But that's, again, not on a supercomputer. And you guys know how fast computing power is increasing. It's growing at an exponential rate. That's going to be down to 59 seconds in a couple years. This is why we need a better mechanism than typing in passwords. That's why this two-factor authentication thing matters a lot too. All right. Are we making it too easy for these guys? Well, the obvious answer to that is yes, because they're always a step ahead of us. It doesn't matter what we're putting in place. They seem to beat us to the gun and hack our systems. But how are they doing that? What are they doing? Because most of these guys are not like slipping in the back door of a building and sifting through papers to get passwords. They're doing it more sophisticated ways. And they're also getting it from much more sophisticated technologies. So you may have heard the term IoT, or Internet of Things. Internet of Things is basically any sort of device that has a chip in it that communicates across a Wi-Fi or a Bluetooth signal. Now, just around me here, there's probably 5 things that have this. One is my Fitbit watch. That communicates. Another is this really ridiculous thing that I had to buy because I'm a tech guy and I just love technology. But have you guys seen these yet? These are dash buttons from Amazon. I push this button that says Bounty on it, and tomorrow I'll have Bounty paper towels show up at my house. It's stupid. It makes no sense. And I have 3 kids that want to push this button every chance they get. Because, of course, what I did is show them this and the Tide button that goes with it. And I was like, look how cool this is. You push this button, and it orders it. So the kids just want to sit there and push it. So I've got stacks of Tide like this all over my house now. This is no joke. This is a real product. I thought these were a joke, actually, because they announced it on April Fools, and Amazon has a way of goofing on themselves, but it's a real thing. Now, here's what's funny about this. This has a Wi-Fi device in it. By the way, these are $4.99, and they apply that $4 to your first order, so it's basically free. And they have them for all those things, and about 50 other things. Frequently ordered products. So I started thinking about this. You know what I just did, though? I just put another Wi-Fi point in my house. Another way that if somebody was going to hack me, they could hack. Because this is a connection to a Wi-Fi device. And I said, but nobody's going to do that. That's ridiculous. Nobody's going to do that. These just came out 3 months ago. I just got mine last week. So the general public can just get them now. I Googled it because I said, I've never been stumped in Google. I'm going to find somebody that's done this. Sure enough, this guy hacked one of these things. Now, his was a pretty interesting hack. He isn't doing anything wrong. Well, Amazon may think he's doing something wrong, but he said there's no value, and you might notice that it's a Huggies. So he orders diapers with that, which thankfully our kids are out of diapers, but I could have used that like crazy when we had kids in diapers. And he said, you know, this isn't that valuable for me to be able to push a button and get diapers in a couple days, but there is something I would really like to do with that. So he started tinkering with it, and he said, his kid happened to have colic and an intestinal problem. He wanted to know when his kid was waking up and having a dirty diaper. So instead of using his smartphone and typing that in or keeping a notepad by the bed and writing it down, he hacked it. He hacked it. So now every time he pushes that button, when the kid has a poopy diaper, it logs it into his computer. And he made this software available to us. It's a really, really simple program. So when I get tired of Bounty paper towels loading up in my basement, I'm going to make this use do something interesting. But all this made me come back to the idea of, my gosh, I just put another infiltration point in my house. And these things are popping up everywhere. Our dogs have these things now. Your dogs are walking around with RFID chips in them, a lot of them, for tracking, whether or not they're lost. Our houses are loaded with them. Google's making a huge investment in this space. I'm not sure if this is my next slide, one after this. You guys probably have seen some of this, the most powerful sales tool at Lowe's. I know Lowe's is regional, so Lowe's is like Home Depot and Menards, big box hardware store. So they're looking at combining satellite parking data, a satellite imaged parking lot data. Now what does that mean? So this company, Digital Globe, they're one of about a half dozen companies that are doing this now. They're putting satellites up in space, not to stream Notre Dame football. No, they're selling their parking lot scan data to money managers, hedge funds. But why would they do that? And to people like Lowe's. They want to see what the volume of the parking lot looks like. Why? Well, Lowe's is a public company, and Lowe's releases quarterly data. And that's not good enough for me to trade on these days. I want real-time data. I want to know how many cars are in the parking lot. I want to know how many cars are going into Kmart. I want to know how many are going into Walmart so that I can trade based on that information. If I'm Lowe's, I actually like this too because I want to see what the volume of purchases relative to the number of cars in my parking lot. I want to see who's walking in that store and not making purchases and why they're not making purchases. Now, yeah, there's business reasons for this, but if you start thinking about what are we doing to open this up to hackers? Because now, look, I'll take this one happens to be the biggest one. This particular satellite here, Worldview 1, which is up there, scans 1.5 million kilometers squared per day. I wish I could translate that into miles. It's a lot of miles. 1.5 million kilometers squared a day that it can scan. And these guys can read, most of these things can read down to the license plate level. Now, are they doing that? They're not reporting that they're doing that, but they certainly can tell whether it's an SUV, a minivan, or a Mini Cooper that's in a parking lot. And they are, in a real-time way, feeding that data back down to us terrestrials here on Earth to do some fantastic data analytics with. Drones can do it too, but this is, and in fact, Google and Amazon are investing big into this right now. They're trying to, Google mostly on the unmanned aircraft side, but it's cheaper to put an unmanned aircraft up than it is to put a multi-million-dollar, sometimes approaching billion-dollar satellites up. So they put solar-powered planes up that are doing the exact same thing. It's also doing some good things. They're giving Wi-Fi to regions of the world that have no means of getting Wi-Fi. That's a big issue right now. That's why Amazon and Google have lots of lobbyists talking to the FAA and everybody else trying to figure out what we can do with this stuff. Because, technologically, we're to the point where we can, you've seen the Amazon video where somebody orders a part that they need and, a minute later, a drone is picking it up, lifting it off, and delivering it on the guy's front doorstep. We can do that. Technologically, we can do that. There's no infrastructure problems for it. There are legal reasons we can't yet do that. But that'll change. That's going to change in our lifetimes. We're going to see something on that order happening. So we have data that's being collected here, too. Mountains of data. You guys, the stuff we're collecting here at in our computer systems at Notre Dame and at businesses is nothing compared to what we're getting in real time from these sensors. Here's an interesting quote from Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google. There were 5 exabytes of information created in the entire world between the dawn of civilization in 2003. We make that every 2 days now. Every 2 days. And here, another one that just puts it into perspective. By 2020, we'll have created 40 zettabytes. I don't even know what that is or how to pronounce it. But that's 57 times all the grain of sand on the beaches on the earth. That gives you a perspective, a little bit of perspective. Because I can't get my head around what quadrillion and trillions really are, what they look like. But when we start talking about the grains of sand, and that's how much information, how much data we have, that is surprising. And the one that continually amazes me, and what amazes me about this is 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. That continues. We've been saying this for 5 years, which that means next year we'll create that much more data that we can completely trump what we said the year before. Now, where is this coming from? As I said, it's not coming from here. Enterprise data, so the stuff that we have, sales data, employee administrative data, it's not that. I mean, that's a lot of data, but it's not that. Voice, because everything we do these days, whenever we speak on our phones or when we go through IP telephones, it's all digital. We get some data from that. We also get some data from social media. But we get the majority of it from sensors. I don't know if you guys have followed this at all, but Google bought these guys. I thought, Google is this sexy company. Why in the world are they buying a thermostat company? Or a fire alarm company? Well, the guy who started this company, Nest, happens to be the former product manager at Apple. And he's created smart sensors in the home. Now, what's really interesting about this is that thermometer, does anybody have a Nest in here? They're about $150. That thermometer, thermostat in your house knows when you're home, and they know whether it's your cat that's home or it's you that's home. And they know that from tracking all sorts of things that are going on in the home. Now, this is great from an environmental standpoint because it shuts off the heat. And it knows that we generally get home at 5:30 at my house. So it starts the heat back up around 5:15 so that when we get there, it's nice and warm. Great idea, right? Well, what it's done is it's opened Google into our homes. And where this starts to get really interesting for them is that companies like Whirlpool, just up the road here, have made big investments in Nest. Why? Because they're ready, they think society is now ready to put these sorts of sensors in our washing machines, our dryers, our dishwashers, our refrigerators, so that our refrigerator knows when we slide a gallon of milk in that refrigerator that all has a UPC code on it, a unique code, that we have a gallon of milk in our refrigerator now. And all that information gets fed back to some central hub where Whirlpool starts to figure out what it is we really need. And if they can sense when our washing machine seal is going to fail so that it doesn't flood our house, a day or two before, I'm all for it. I love the idea. Send me that email. They do it in my car already. I have OnStar in my vehicle. It tells me when I have a low tire. All of that is sensor data. All of that data is being stored in places all over the world. And all of that data is ripe for being breached. It's all there. You guys probably saw this. It just happened in July of this year. I believe it was Car and Driver, was it? Or Consumer Reports hired a hacker to see if they could hack into the electronic system of this Jeep. And they were able to do it and drive the Jeep off the side of the road, or disable it to the extent that they were able to drive it off the side of the road. This is a real thing now. It's real that we can actually hack into a car. It seems sci-fi, but it's real. All right, so now that we've petrified everybody, right? Now that we're all ready to go hop in our bomb-proof shelter and turn off all of our gadgets, I hope that's not your intent, because I live probably exactly like you guys do. I use social media. I have Facebook. I'm probably not as good with my passwords as I should be. And, I'm still here. And you guys are still here, too. Can we protect ourselves? Well, one of the ways, here's the easiest way to do it. Watch out for the phishing scams. And I think if you have an email account, you've probably been a recipient of these, and they often look like this. And by the way, if you're interested, write this down. It's a 10-question quiz. If you don't want to write this down, just Google Sonic Wall phishing quiz, and you'll find it. But it gives you images of 10 fake and real emails and what to look for when one comes to you. So just in looking at this one here, does anything stand out to you as, ooh, this could be a fake? Can you see that? What's that? Dear subscriber. You got one, dear member. Okay. Down here, good catch. There's no HTTPS. That means it's not secure. A lot of folks don't know that. If that's not an S and you're asked to do something, do not click it. With a lack of an S there, it's not a secured website. So we picked up a few. Dear member is usually a dead giveaway. If they don't use your name or some element of your name, then in all likelihood they're phishing for your name. The other thing, now this is counterintuitive, they're actually very descriptive about elements. So they have this whole section here on transaction ID, seller's transaction, transaction amount. Most legitimate banks will not do that in an email. They'll direct you to a place where you can see that. But what these guys are doing, they've actually reverse psychology on us here. They've said, well, we think people are going to trust us more if we start to reveal information. Now, this happens to be fake information, but let's face it, we all have a lot of accounts. And I very well could say, geez, maybe my wife spent $252. I need to check this out. I'm going to click this link. The second you click that link, you can launch a malware program, a program that infects your computer, that would do something like what happened at JP Morgan. Or could be more simple. You know, it's just a home computer. And what it does is it tracks keystrokes. So every time after this thing launches, every time you start typing something, it's going to be tracking what you're typing. And when you're typing passwords, right? So it can be able to get that sort of information. So I'm going to identify. One, it's not addressed to you. Two, the phisher identifies the problem and was very descriptive about it, provides great detail. Another typical, this isn't always the case, but a lot of times they'll bury a hyperlink. They'll say click here, and the word here is the one that's highlighted, but they won't give you a full URL. Always hover over that here and see what appears at the bottom. In this case, what appears at the bottom is a non-secure website. Doesn't have, and this one's really simple. If you take one thing away from what I tell you today, make sure they're always HTTPS. Now, if you go to any sort of website, ESPN.com, there's going to be elements within that website which are not HTTPS. So they're not secure, but that's okay, you're reading content. If you go to a site where you're buying something, it better be secure. Okay? I'll give you a couple more of these. So this one looks like it comes from Bank of America. Anything that strikes you about this? There's one fairly obvious thing. Dear customer again. Yeah, we got that. That one will be the same here. And ignore the fact that it has just gibberish in the two. It's poorly formatted. Any legitimate bank is not going to send you a poorly formatted. So for example, it has the arrow up here that shouldn't be there. It has a picture that didn't appear. Now this can be computer related, but oftentimes it's not. Color coding is often not used in professional, now there are exceptions to this, but this is a color coded alert, and it's not typical that professional firms will do that, particularly banks. All right, now this one I'll just say quickly, this one is actually legit. And that's what I like about this little quiz too, is they give you some legit. Now, a couple things that we look for immediately. One, HTTPS. And two, it actually references a Chase account, a chase.com. That's important. often what they'll do with hyperlinks is they'll bury, like this says alerts.bankofamerica.com. That's just text. When you mouse over that, it'll actually show like some other website down here that doesn't take you to a Bank of America. You want to make sure that you're going to a Bank of America account. There's also one other really simple way to deal with these things. Go log into your account and see any legitimate bank is going to have a message box in there. So anything that gets sent to you should fill that message box. So if you're not seeing that there's anything in the message box and you get something like this, it's probably fake. And this is probably the biggest way that hackers are getting into our systems these days. All right, so how do I protect for financial data? Things to think about. And I know we're probably getting close on time here. Where are we? Is there a clock in here? Oh, 2:50, okay. Choose your bank wisely. Go online, look for, and you can go to privacy rights, see if they've had a past breach. Now, this shouldn't automatically disqualify them. If it did, there would be no banks left in the world for us because so many of them had breaches. But here's some things that you can ask them, and I will tell you this, some of the banks will not answer this, and they often won't answer it over the phone. So you sometimes do have to go in to get this information. But who do they share data with? Do they sell this in a clearinghouse manner? Are people buying the data that you are providing to them? How do they deal with breaches? This is the one that hit me this summer. I'll tell you this really quick story, but my wife and I and family were in Italy for 6 weeks working on a Notre Dame project, actually. We got home in late July, and I got a call about 8:30 at night from Notre Dame Federal Credit Union, one of our local banks, and they said, do you have your debit card with you? And I said, yeah. I went and looked. It's in my hand. They said, did you authorize a transaction in the amount of $275 in Bali, Indonesia? Well, no, I didn't. I'm actually sitting here in South Bend, Indiana, and I didn't do that. Well, there's fraudulent activity. We're going to shut down your card. Okay, thank you very much. Come in tomorrow and we'll deal with this in the bank. I'll get to that in a second. Half an hour later, I get the exact same call from Chase, totally unaffiliated with Notre Dame. And I said, all right, this is weird. Now I'm starting to freak out that I gave data to the first person that called, but it seemed legit. She gave me they said, no, it's probably legit, but was there ever an instance where you used the same card at the same ATM? And I said, yes, there actually was. I went to an ATM in Venice. It wouldn't take my card. So I put in my other card to get money. And they said, well, here's what's going on. It's a common scam right now, and you guys would probably face this, particularly in Western Europe, where they put pen cameras in the ATM machines. The hackers do. So not only as I'm sliding my card in, are they reading my card, they're also watching the PIN as I type it in. Now what they do is, and they told me this over the phone, they said, well, they actually had the plate, meaning they had the card, they did a swipe. Well, how did they have the card? Because I have the card in my hand. Well, it's sophisticated to the extent now that they can do magnetic strips on cards, produce them with my information on them and the PIN, and transact. Now, the punchline to all of this story, so Notre Dame, both banks got my money back. I'll get to that in a second. Chase, completely over the phone. They said, we'll send you a card. Your money will be back in your bank before the end of the day tomorrow, so 24 hours. ND Federal Credit Union did also a nice job. They got me my money back. I had to go in and fill out a form to do it, though, and I had to go in and get a new ATM card. Now, there's part of that that bothers me, and there's part of that that gives me reassurance. But both of them had a zero liability policy up to a certain dollar value. And I don't know what that dollar value is because they often don't reveal it. But here's what you need to look for. Right here. Confirm with your bank that they have a zero liability policy on debit and credit. If they don't have that, that means you're on the hook. And these guys, they took $275 and then they tried to make 2 transactions of about $80. I don't know why they chose what they did. There must be a reason. They got the first one and the second one. They didn't get the third one. But all of that would have been on me if we didn't have a zero liability policy. And we don't pay extra for it. It's just part of the bank's policy. Now, I won't go into this because we don't have time, but there are cases being legislated right now, in particular one that I'm following, where $560,000 was stolen out of a bank account through a wire transfer fraud. And it's being contested right now, but the court found in favor of the bank. $560,000 and the court found in favor of the bank. Now, it's being, they're taking it back to court on this, and I don't know where it's going to go. But thankfully, I don't have that kind of money to worry about yet on these sorts of things. But you really want to pay attention to this. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it depends on the size of the bank, but 250. No, I don't think there's anything. I mean, you absolutely. I mean, the way that these guys typically work is they're taking down one account at a time at this point, but there's no reason that they couldn't be taking down more than one account. It gets extremely complicated, though, because even this case I mentioned, the $560,000, that was actually dispersed into 5 separate accounts, all in Eastern Europe. And that's the way they got away with it. The money was not retrieved. They did not get the money back. I know I'm going to run out of time here now, so I want to get through a couple more things. Another thing this is a no-brainer, guys, but inform your bank when you're traveling. They actually, when both banks called me, they said, we know you were recently in Italy. Was there a chance you're in Bali, Indonesia? We weren't. But because they knew that, they also didn't. The other problem is, you get in a foreign country and all of a sudden your credit cards don't work because you didn't tell them you were going to be in a foreign country. I know people that do this domestically. I don't do this domestically, but you do this domestically.
A friend of mine who just went to Florida this past weekend, and all his credit card companies stopped letting him buy gas.
Yeah. Well, the very first thing, almost always the first thing that a hacker will do is try to get gas. That's one of the that's the call you'll get the most too, is did you just fill up your car in Louisville, Kentucky or whatever? Gas is what they get first. Okay. And another thing I found through this too is, do they have a fraud notification department or do they contract it out? And there's reasons to want both of these, because if it's a fraud notification firm, they're probably pretty good at it. But I have to say, like, I've had experience now with Chase and Bank of America and their specific fraud departments, and they seem very, very sophisticated. So I'm sort of leaning on, I like that it's internal in this case. All right, monitor your accounts occasionally, and do they use chip-based or credit debit cards? You guys know what I'm talking about here? All right, these are the winners, right? I'm not so sure. EMVs. By the way, EMVA is an acronym. It's EuroPay, MasterCard, Visa. It's a standard. It's not really like a technical acronym. It's a standard for how those companies, the transaction companies, want to transact money in the future. And in case you're wondering, that's the chip, that little guy right there. I think 2 of the 3 cards I have in my wallet, and I only use 3, 1 credit card, 2 debit cards, have that chip in them. And I feel more comfortable about that, particularly when I'm in Europe and other places than the US. Why? I'll get to that why in a second. But what this does do is it makes it harder for hackers, because that chip, when it's inserted, gets assigned to the actual transaction. So this situation I told you about a second ago, where they get my credit card or my debit card number and the code, that won't work, because this chip has to be on that card or it will not transact. However, there's a big however here, a big one. They're not standard in the US. So if you get this card, which many of you have now, and if they ask you to swipe it, or they insist that you swipe it, instead of sliding it in, that is no better than any other card you have without a chip. And guess what? The vast majority of the systems in the US right now do not have the insert. They only have the swipe. The swipe is just as bad as it always has been. You have to use the chip. So just having the chip doesn't help you. All right. So RFID is another solution here if you have a card that has that on it. But of course, there's something wrong with these too. People are stealing these because RFID can span up to 20 feet, or 10 to 20 feet, depends on the type. And now, of course, some clever hackers figured out how to read your RFID while it's in your pocket. So there's ways, but credit card companies still say that's okay. You know, we think that these are better. Field tests are showing that's not the case. But you can protect these from leaking. The term they use is leaking information. And you can find YouTube videos on this. This is crazy. But you can actually carve that RFID chip out of your card. Or you can smash it with a hammer. Neither of which makes any sense to me at all, because you hand it to a consumer or a merchant, and they're probably going to say, we can't take this card. Somebody's chewed on it or something. But you can buy protective sleeves for these, and a lot of wallets these days come with, you'll see RFID resistant cards. But you know, for every little trick we have to fix this problem, the hacker's one step ahead. All right, medical data and things to think about. Choose your providers wisely. Now here's the thing, the punchline to this one. If you're informed your medical data has been breached, which I have this summer, contact your providers and confirm your data are correct. Why does this matter? This matters a lot because if someone has in fact co-opted your medical data and gotten treatment, and they happen to have a blood type that's different than yours, and it's now all of a sudden your blood type, that can matter a lot. Now there are a handful of instances out there that have shown this to happen, but the mere fact that we're seeing these things happening a lot more suggests that this is a wise thing to do. Now, the challenge with this is a lot because of HIPAA and everything else. There's a lot of providers that are not going to reveal this information to you over the phone. So you're probably, some of you guys do have portals where you can just go in and see all your data and make sure it's okay. But some of you will actually have to go in and confirm that your data is still accurate. All right. So in closing here, I know it's 3 o'clock. The narrative is not going to be about stopping hacking. People have tried this. It's not going to be this. People aren't believing that it can be stopped, and I'm not convinced it can be either. I think it's all going to be about recovering from a hack. How quickly can we recover? How quickly do I get money put back into my account? How quickly do I have credit cards back in my hands? How quickly is my medical data confirmed to be accurate? That to me seems like where this is going to be going. And I would agree that there are services out there that can help you to do that. Possibly LifeLock, Reputation Builder, some of these other guys out there that are doing stuff like this. Basically what they're doing is the heavy lifting for you. So they're contacting your banks and stuff to make sure that all of this stuff is put back where it should be and that you're covered. But to think that we can pull the plug on this and make it all go away, security technology is not there yet to where we can do it. I think that, I have 2 slides on research, but I can stop here and take questions maybe. Do you have another group coming in here at 3? We don't, but in a few minutes we do. Okay. I'm happy to take a couple questions, or I'm going to just jump through this so you can see my really cool, I always end my slides on this because, this is a Notre Dame crowd, right? That's my 1934 truck.
Yeah. A question. You get a lot of hacking from foreign countries, and part of the technical problem is that they have access because we're dependent upon the World Wide Web. But if we were to move off the World Wide Web, had our own system, let's say U.S. system, which is our own, I call it our own dark web, or the white web, whatever you want to call it.
Let's call it the white web.
That would.
Well, it didn't mean that way, but
that should retard, I would imagine, the amount of hacking from abroad, at least, and that would be a start.
I think there's reasons why we don't want that too, though. Like, there are reasons. mean, obviously NSA reasons why we want to be tapped into what's going on worldwide too, but
Well, we can keep both. I mean, well, the NSA can keep their own virtual network or their own system, having access through the World Wide Web. And we could do so in, I don't know, from a content standpoint. Go through but not commercial, actually, not financial, commercial. We don't want to use the World Wide Web for that. But if you want information,
you can see it. Yeah.
I mean, I have two systems. One's more safe house and one independent to a great extent.
So there's a couple of challenges I see with that. One is that, so we already have, I'll just use the term intranets. So say corporate-wide intranets, those get infiltrated all the time, even though they are not technically part of the World Wide Web. I think that there would be technological challenges with isolating that system. I think that the bigger issue would be that, I mean, I think from a political standpoint, it would be a very, I mean, here we are, I can say, here we are talking in the debates the other night and half the discussions about how we build a wall around, Texas and the southern states, but now trying to build a wall around the United States from an internet standpoint, I think it would be such a political hotbed issue. And the international firms too, I think would be challenged to want to participate in something like that. We got to figure out a way to protect this, but I'm not sure how that works.
IPv6 has that built in,
That's true.
and there are things called physically unclonable devices that get around people taking copies of other devices.
Yeah, without getting too technical, but there are standards in place, or there are standards coming that are going to be better than what we have right now too.
Take just one more quick question.
Thank you. Good job, good presentation. Two things quickly. That first segment showing the live time as it goes on, was that Norse? You said we can access that?
Yeah, you won't be able to get it through Norse.com. You have to go through I'll take you back there so you can see it. It's if you type in mapipviking.com, you can get there. It'll take you to something called Norse, though.
Okay.
I think it's called map.norse.com.
The last thing, what happened to the guy in the kayak?
He was fine. The guy in the kayak was good.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation. Thank you so much for helping us.